Good morning, Point Bay community. It's Rick Jones here again. The video is not from the shores of Lake Erie as usual. It is actually from the shores of Craig Bay on the east coast of Vancouver Island, near the community of Parksville, which is about 40 kilometers north of Nanaimo. And I have the privilege of being able to be here to visit some of my relatives for this week. But I wanted to share the video with you from a different place. So the readings for this week are very interesting because they refer to a place called Gehenna. And in Mark's reading, Jesus is reported to have said that it is better that you cut off a limb of your body than to have your whole body burn up in Gehenna. And of course, over the years, people have thought that this is some reference to hell. And so I thought maybe it might be a good idea to just talk a little bit about hell, because many people just discount it in their minds. They say, well, no, I don't believe in hell. They don't really know why they don't believe in hell, but they just feel like, that couldn't be some place that God would tolerate, given that we believe in a God of love. But they're troubled because there's these references, particularly in the New Testament, in Mark and in Matthew especially, to this place called Gehenna, and people being cast into this fiery pit. So first of all, what is this fiery pit? And some of you probably already know. This is a reference. Gehenna is actually a reference to a place. It's actually the garbage dump in Jerusalem, on the outskirts of Jerusalem. It's a place where people came and they threw things in there, and they lit everything on fire. And it was kind of a really terrible place. I mean, it was all smoky and filled with garbage and animals and smoke and flames, and it burned nonstop. It just kept burning and burning. And over the years, people began to associate this kind of a terrible burning place with evil, because that's where you threw things that you didn't want, that were unclean, contaminated, and whatnot. And so in people's minds, Gehenna became associated with kind of an evil place. Not unlike actually when my son was a peacekeeper in Kosovo a few years ago, quite a few now, I guess. He told stories about having to drive the garbage to the dump there outside of the city that he was serving in, and it was a terrible place. He said kids were scavenging all over. There were dead animals. Everything was on fire. There was smoke. He said it was truly an image of hell, right out of Dante's Inferno. And that's interesting, because when he mentioned Dante's Inferno, I realized, and I think many people now acknowledge, that our ideas about hell actually are more conditioned by reading Dante's Inferno than reading the Bible or any other source. So, all of these, it makes for great medieval art, but how accurate is it to the biblical record, and particularly to what we know and believe about Jesus, and obviously about God? So first of all, I think we need to state right up front that in spite of what you might think you're reading in Mark and Matthew, there isn't actually any direct references to a place, hell, that a particular apocalyptic place, a place in the future, a place after we die or at the judgment, that God has engineered for people to be punished. Now, I realize that there are people who right away are going to tune me out and going to say, well, no, that's not right. You're not reading the Bible correctly. And then I think that gets to a good point. People choose to read the Bible in one of two ways. There are what we call literalists or fundamentalists, and they're people that say, look, the Bible is words on a page. We can read it. We can understand what it says. It's very straightforward. And we're going to take it basically literally as history. And of course, I mean, there's always been people who read the Bible that way. There's people that read the Bible that way today. I think it must be very difficult actually to rationalize all this, however, because even if you choose to read the Bible that way, you still find yourself picking and choosing what you're going to accept and what you're not going to accept. Because we really don't go around stoning people for things the way the Bible suggests anymore. And there are things that people choose to ignore. However, that aside, there are people who read the Bible that way, and there's people like myself and many other people who choose to read the Bible the way they would read other kinds of literature. So they apply historical critical methodologies. They look at it as literature. They look at the historical context. They try to figure out what the author's agenda is, because every book of the Bible was written not by God automatic writing, but by a human being who had an agenda. They had a story they wanted to tell. There was something that was important to them that they wanted to share. And so you need to figure all that out, it seems to me, if you really want to know what the Bible is trying to teach and trying to tell us. And especially true of the words of Jesus, which we know most of the words of Jesus were put into Jesus' mouth by the authors to show us actually what they believed they heard Jesus saying, or what they thought Jesus was all about. And so that's why scholars today try to figure out what did Jesus really say, and that's a whole other enterprise, as it were. So getting back to the problem of hell, it's not something that I've been able to embrace very easily in my life, because I became a follower of Jesus because Jesus, it seemed to me, was the face of God, the wisdom of God, the person who could tell me the most about this God that I so much wanted to get closer. I had to put a hat on here at Craig Bay. It's pretty bright with the sun coming up. But getting back to our story, if we can't always go exactly by what Jesus says in the Bible, and we believe, as many of us do, that Jesus truly shows us what God is like, what God cares about, then we can look at Jesus' actions and say, what did he actually do when he was interacting with people to show us what God was like? And if we look at Jesus' life, I think what we see quite clearly is that Jesus was a extremely passionate, compassionate person who healed. He healed the sick. He told people that his whole purpose, his mission, was to proclaim freedom and release and healing and justice. And he did that everywhere he went. He healed people. He taught people. He was radically inclusive. He embraced the outcasts. He ate and drank, as we say in our Eucharist, with outcasts and sinners. He healed the sick. He opened the eyes of the blind. He was all about showing love, and not just love to the good people, as it were, the people, the righteous people. He had a particular passion for opening up the hearts and minds and lives of people who were in the bondage of lifestyle addictions, that were involved in things that were destructive to their very being, and he wanted to liberate them from that kind of a hell and to release them into what he called the kingdom of God, which was a relationship with God that brings out the most and the best potential in each and every one of us. So Jesus was all about not judging, actually. And so if you think that Jesus was the face of God, then how could you possibly imagine that there would be a God who would basically consign most of humanity to some kind of a fiery judgment for all of eternity, which is basically what some people believe hell's all about. There's a story in John's Gospel, I think that many of us know, but is very illustrative of how Jesus functioned. And that's there's a woman in John's Gospel who is brought to Jesus, caught in the act of adultery, and of course they want to stone her because this is what the law says you do with people who are caught in adultery. And and he says, he doesn't say, "Oh yeah, let's punish her." He says, "The one who is without sin cast the first stone." And he creates a situation through his example and through his charisma and through his words where the people are all radically convicted that you know what, we can't judge others the way we think we should or we would like to, because doesn't revenge feel good. We have to recognize that in ourselves we expect to be treated with compassion. We expect to be loved and forgiven. Why would we not want that for someone else as well? And so the story says that nobody cast the first stone, and the woman was set free. So that's really the Jesus that you see in the Gospels. In spite of words that may have been put into Jesus' mouth, Jesus never condemns anyone, really. I mean, you can talk about some of the Pharisee sayings in Matthew, but there's a reason why Matthew chose to attack the Pharisees so strongly through Jesus. It was because basically his community was being thrown out of the synagogues when he wrote that gospel. But I digress. But my point is simple. Look at Jesus if you want to see God. Do you see Jesus judging, or do you see him loving? I realize this is a challenge for many people, and my uncle was a person who really had a challenge with this. He was raised as a Mennonite in British Columbia here, and he was very devout, and he was an accountant. He was a bright man. He was the man who many people feel he was the first person to have a personal computer in British Columbia, because he was into electronics, and he bought a kit from somewhere in the States, and he actually put it together himself. He created his own computer for his accounting business here in Chilliwack, BC, and he was quite proud of it. Actually, when I was a very, very young boy, he still had this thing that he had built, years before, kind of thing, and it was his first computer. But he was a person who was a lifelong learner. He didn't, he didn't just stop thinking when he became an adult. He continued to study and struggle with some of the ideas that he had been taught as a child, and that his church still expected him to embrace. And towards his later years, he became a person who we would call a universalist. Well, what's a universalist? It's a person who believes that God's love is so embracive and so universal that no one will be able to escape the net of God's love. That God will bring in the whole of creation, all of humanity, into a relationship with God, and there's a happy ending for everyone. There's no hell. And some of us have a problem with that, because we don't want a happy ending for some people. But as I said before, we need to look at our own hearts when we think that. But when you look at the heart of God, especially through Jesus, everyone's included. Everyone is going to be redeemed. Everyone is going to be saved. And God will make that happen. And if not in an earthly existence, then in some way God's will be done in the end. Otherwise, how could God be God? So my uncle sent me some literature just as I was starting out in ministry, because he thought I would be interested, and he shared some of his pain at being basically rejected by his brothers and sisters in the church that he went to, because he had this non-judgmental view of God and this universal idea of God's love. And what's interesting, though, is that if you look back at the history of the early church, that was a common view. That you look at some of the early church fathers, that you can see that they didn't believe in hell. Then they believed in kind of universal salvation through the love of God. Anyway, I haven't been able to really talk about all of the aspects that we could talk about. This is a big subject, but I wanted to share this with you this morning because if you're like me, and when you read passages in the Bible that talk about hell, it kind of upsets you a little bit. Then it's good to know that you're in good company, because all through history there have been people from the earliest church followers to I would say right back to Jesus, who really don't have a whole lot of time for this concept of hell, which was really kind of created in a way to control people, I think, and to kind of coerce people into kind of a behavior that may not really even be authentic. So better to love and to be loved than to live in fear of a judgmental and condemning God. I hope you have a wonderful week, and that you stay safe, and God bless you all.